Alright, there's no point in sugarcoating it. A Good Day to Die Hard is one of the worst sequels to ever grace a mainstream franchise. Die Hard fans just go quiet when someone dares evoke the spectre of Die Hard 5. The best we can do today is try and diagnose everything that went wrong. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I'm on vacation.
Oh, he said that a lot, didn't he? This is a movie podcast. We work through franchises in different categories of movies. Maybe it's a subgenre, maybe it's a director's filmography, or sometimes it's simply just the movie's franchise. And that's what we're doing here. Today is the final episode of Die Hard season. Therefore, today is the fifth Die Hard movie, A Good Day to Die Hard. That's what we're going to be talking about. So We'll start spoiler-free, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to the spoilers. And of course, if you're enjoying the show, please do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch. And you can get bonus shows monthly over our Patreon if you want to support everything and help keep it coming. But I'll tell you more about those at the end of the episode. So, I said last week that Die Hard 4 was much worse than I remembered, and we tore it to shreds pretty much for a variety of reasons. Go back and check out the episode if you skipped that one. But I said confidently at the end that I still believed that Die Hard 5 is worse. Easily. So I am fascinated. I know if I think I was right or not in that statement, obviously, because I know what I'm going to say. But I am fascinated to just get a simple answer. Do you agree with that statement, David?
If we're comparing whole movies to whole movies, I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
But I'm going to qualify that with this is pretty much mercifully the smallest thing that could actually be called a feature film and still put out. This is barely cracking 90 minutes. And it's just done. It's
mercifully short at the very least. That is the one. But if that's the only positive we've got going for it, that's pretty damning. Die Hard 5 is one of the worst sequels in a franchise. I was thinking this as I was watching it. I was like, oh, this is actually just as terrible and horrible as I remembered it being. The way it completely just doesn't get what made Die Hard, and just John McClane doesn't feel like John McClane. The tone is wildly out of place, and even when it tries to add a bit of Die Hard humor in there, it feels so forced and just doesn't jive with this gritty, serious thriller they're going for otherwise.
100% feels to me that this was 2013, and this was after the MCU had already done its get a load of this kind of humor going on.
Yeah, we're right. I mean, this is the year after the first Avengers came out, so we're deep into the MCU by this point, which is weird to think. It's on a special level. I was thinking as I was watching it of what other franchise sequels, or in some cases not even a sequel, some cases maybe a remake, but what other franchises have an entry that's like this that I hate with this level of passion. And the few answers that were coming to mind, funnily enough, given that Jai Courtney's also in it, is Terminator Genesis is one of them. Rob Zombie's Halloween movie sprang to mind. I think you can make an argument for, say, something like Jurassic World Dominion, maybe a Rise of Skywalker, but it's a special level of just F you. This is horrid.
Whenever we're doing these things, I've got up the IMDb page and the Wikipedia page just so I can really know what I'm talking about. The IMDb page has just a normal poster for this movie, just says the title, the date, all that stuff. The Wikipedia, for whatever reason, has the same thing, but in big, bold block text on the cover. It says, "Yippee-ki-yay, Mother Russia." And I think that explains everything what I hate about this.
I mean, I suppose if there's a slight positive to be given compared to 4, because we were so critical on 4, it's not like it has the same exact problems as 4 in every case. It's not as edited poorly as 4. No. So, I mean, that's something to give it.
Congratulations, you passed your 101 class.
That said, though, it arguably looks worse a lot of the time because of like what they're going for in terms, again, this ultra desaturated, gritty thriller tone, and like all of that stuff just feels really, really rough. But objectively there is a positive there. I guess the other positive I'll slightly give it. I didn't really like the scene because it fits into this really weird dark tone that they're going for. This really depressing, like, oh, everything's serious and sad. But at the very least, it doesn't undo the end of 4 in that his relationship with his daughter seems to be in a good place still. So that's something. They didn't undo that.
Yeah, I don't know whether or not to give her credit or like try to figure out how to wire her money. But Mary Elizabeth Winstead, from signing up for 4 and then coming back for 5, she must have needed a job, man.
I mean, I mean, this is like a year after 10 Cloverfield Lane, so she was probably like, as far as like nerds saying, "Hey, she's great," like she was probably around her peak at this point, but she came back for this cameo.
Yeah, that's more questioning as to why did she show back up if she had the option not to.
Maybe she didn't. Maybe she was contracted for 3 movies when she signed up for 4. I mean, that's not irregular for Hollywood franchise movies.
That's fair. I do wonder then if maybe that's like she's the only one they brought back on, and Justin Long was like waiting by the phone, hoping to get a call about Die Hard 5.
Well, maybe it's just as simple as they had the option of bringing him back, but he'd signed a contract that was like twice the price of hers, so she was the cheaper option to come back for a scene.
That makes sense. Honestly, makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, here's something I learned, actually. So I was curious, because there's an extended cut of this movie, right? I did not watch the extended cut. I watched the theatrical cut. That said, though, it's only 3 minutes longer than the theatrical. That said, though, that there's more added than that implies, because there's also stuff taken out. So here's the weird bit of trivia about the extended cut that I learned when researching it. They cut out Mary Elizabeth Winstead. All of her scenes are gone. Because she was the problem, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I really hated the moment she was cut. That raises questions about many things, actually, in how this movie is structured. Because, like, I have to assume that means that this movie picks up and he's just already in Russia.
No, because there's the scene where the cop talks to him first. You get that.
Oh, that's right, the cop.
And then you go, then he's in the plane. So there you go. There's your lead in. There's a phone call you cut out, and then I think there's just an alternate scene at the end.
Well, basically. the phone call's a little bit more concerning to me because that was like in the middle of an action scene. So is that just not present? Did they just not cut to the internal of the cab then?
I mean, you just have all the action bits. You just don't cut. There's just a few shots of him on the phone being like, "Honey, I'm busy right now." You just cut out those moments, and there you go.
I guess. I don't know. It seemed so much more ingrained into the moment, but maybe that was just because it was one of the few bits where I was like, "Oh, look, something actually matters between these movies."
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, bizarrely, her being there as Lucy McLean, other than Bruce Willis existing, obviously, is the only possible thing that makes it feel connected to any of the previous Die Hard movies, because there is nothing else. Like, tonally, the second we see John McClane in this movie, he is like serious, it's gritty, he's really morose, and he's like, "Yeah, your son's in Russia, John, and it looks bad, it looks really bad." And like everything with the tone of this movie from the get-go is like, have you not seen Die Hard? Do you not understand what it's supposed to feel like, or who John McClane's supposed to be? Because it doesn't feel like you do.
I have a point I want to make as a comparison, but it is a little bit spoilery, so I'll hold off on it. But it's absolutely missing the point of every prior Die Hard movie, and that's including 4. Like, as much as I didn't like 4, as much as I think it is a poorly made movie, at the very least, it felt like the people behind it had watched the prior Die Hard movies, or at least wanted to make another Die Hard.
Yeah, they were incompetent, but they wanted to make one.
Yeah, this one, it felt like they came in and they were like, okay, the only way that we can make the movie that we actually want to make is by slapping Die Hard on it, which, according to all of the trivia that I see, is that this is the only movie in the entire Die Hard franchise that started as a Die Hard. Everything else was adapting other books, other newspaper articles or whatever.
Technically, the first one, I guess you wouldn't count in that, because it's just, that was Die Hard the book, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it wasn't called Die Hard. It was about like some other thing, and like it wasn't John McClane, it was some other guy in it, and it was adapted into what became Die Hard. But
Sure.
This was the first one where they came into it and they were like, we're making a Die Hard sequel and we are commissioning the script as a Die Hard sequel.
Yeah.
And they just missed it.
Yeah, because with the first one, it's like, okay, that's just the natural development of like becoming a movie. But yeah, with all the sequels, yes, they were all other things that get turned into a Die Hard movie. Whereas, yeah, this one, the one that actually was dedicated, is the one that feels the least like a Die Hard movie. And part of that is the writing, obviously, and the tone and the directing. And yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I mean, Bruce Willis was kind of at a point in his career here where he was just kind of showing up for paychecks, but it really feels it in this movie. He feels like he's not interested in anything that he's doing. It just does not feel like John McClane. It feels like, well, he's technically still involved in lots of action scenes that are kind of stupid and over the top in some ways. It also doesn't feel like that way where it feels like, oh, he's getting beat up, he's hitting the ground, he's in agony, he's grunting, he's muttering to himself as he's trying to get back onto his feet. All of that just feels gone.
Like, there's a few moments in this where, like, he is talking to himself. He is, like, he's got the internal monologue, and it seems like what he's supposed to be doing is cracking jokes, but it feels a lot more like the way that Indiana Jones, like, 5 felt, where it's, this is just Grandpa talk, like, he's just talking to himself now. This isn't something where he's playing a character. He's just doing this.
Yeah, and obviously one of the things, I mean, we sort of just jumped into the opinions. I didn't really give much of a synopsis here, but even just the premise of this movie is the most un-Die Hard you could possibly have, because, like, this movie is about him going to look for the trouble. Like, he goes to Russia.
All right, so while, yes, I agree with you, I will say that the actual premise is he's looking for his son because they haven't spoken for a while, and he finds out his son is in a Russian jail. Yeah. And he doesn't know that there's going to be trouble directly.
True. But it's still very, very different to him just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think something that really bugs me later in this movie, you know how when we talked about Die Hard 1 in particular, and this goes for 2 and 3 as well, to be fair, but 1 established all this, is we praised it so much for John's attitude towards the violence and everything. Like, yeah, he would make fun, he would crack jokes, but it was all very strategically, he was always smart, and it definitely never felt like he was ever in the wrong morally for, like, decisions he was making in the moment, or, you know, whenever he did choose to, like, get into a firefight or something. It always felt like he was justified in the moment.
Yes.
In this movie, from the second he starts doing stuff in Russia with a car, I am like, you're a criminal right now. Why? Yeah. Like, you're doing psychotic stuff and it's not justified. You're just a psychopath. And then the worst part, though, is later on when, like, there's, like, father-son conversations where he's like, let's go do McClane stuff. And what do you mean McClane stuff? Well, we're McClanes. We shoot bad guys, right? We kill bad guys. Let's go kill some bad guys. That was never John McClane. Was just, I want to kill bad guys. That is, like, bastardizing and perversing Die Hard into something that it wasn't.
You know what this feels like to me is that after Die Hard 4, there was a spin-off Die Hard TV show that I never watched. And this is like the TV movie that ties into that. That was the feeling I got from this. Like, it didn't feel like it was actually the continuation of the story I've been following. It felt like I missed an entire separate character change where all of a sudden John McClane is the exact same person that we were happy he wasn't when this was Die Hard 1. He is the invulnerable man who's just going around shooting people because he is on the right side of God.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm sure if you go through 1, 2, 3 with fine-tooth comb, you might find little tiny moments where you go, oh, is he technically in the right in this moment? And maybe you can argue some for very specific little things. But by and large, he's in the situation, the bad guys shoot first usually, or whatever it is. Or, like, the stakes are a place where he's saving, like, hundreds of people on a plane by doing X things, so you're rooting for him. And not that this matters so much in a movie once if the things are established well enough, but in all those movies, he is a cop in America who is protecting the people that he's supposed to be protecting, even if he's technically not in the city that he's, you know, actually employed in.
Yeah, jurisdiction.
But there's several moments in this movie where he holds up a hand to stop traffic, and I'm like, McClane, you don't have a badge because you're in Russia. Like, your badge means nothing here. Like,
look, that's just New York pedestrian. Like, that's just how you do that. You want to cross the street, you just put up your hand and trust that that's going to work.
But it almost felt like he was going to hold up a badge, and it was like, oh, but he can't, so he's just kind of, he's going to mime it.
So here's my issue with the beginning of this movie, like without spoiling too much of anything, this is the moment where I immediately lost faith. Up until this point, I had like, oh, you know, it's trying some stuff. It's not awful, but it's trying. The moment that I lost it is that after the inciting incident happens, we have his son Jack in a car driving away from the incident. And then John, after seeing this massive big thing happen, stops his son in the car and says, "Hey, get out, I want to talk." This seems to me, the way this is structured, is the equivalent of if in Die Hard 1, he hears the gunfire out from the lobby and decides to come out and say, "You know what, I'm not actually okay with you having the last name Gennaro. Let's talk about that right now." And everyone just like looks around like, there's bigger things right now, John. You sure you want to do that?
Yeah, no, it's really awkward, especially since like the rest of the movie points out how observant John McClane is compared to his son, but he is so ignorant in this scene of anything that's going on that's clearly dangerous, and actually puts his son and anyone else in the scene in more danger by insisting that he talk to him, right? There's a lot of stuff I can't say because of spoilers, but I will say the entire like motivation and setup for like, oh, why John's concerned and wants to go see him in Russia, and then when it turns out is actually going on, which I don't think there's some swerves, okay, there's those reveals, whatever. All that stuff kind of makes the initial reasoning kind of like weird and convoluted, and I've got thoughts that I'll get into when we can talk about it. But I will also say that John's reaction to like what's actually going on is so like taken in stride. Like, I'm like, shouldn't you be relieved that this is not what was actually going on?
Yeah.
And he just kind of shrugs it off and says a joke. And I'm like, what is this? This makes no sense. So there's that, but we'll save all that for spoilers because it does get into all the reveals and stuff. Another broad thing that this really pissed me off here is like something that one of the few things that is stuck with these Die Hard movies for 4 and 5 is so not important and is so not the thing they should have kept. And it bothered me that they retread it in 4 with Lucy saying, "No, I'm Gennaro, right? I'm going to call you John."
Oh, yeah.
Jack repeatedly calling him John as if, why is this a thing? This is just weird that both of his kids have decided to do this. And not only that, John McClane had marital issues in the first movie, and it made him relatable and sympathetic, but he'd screwed up, and we understood why he screwed up, and part of the arc of the movie is him realizing, I was the asshole, I screwed up, I've learned something through this, happy ending, they've reconciled, blah, blah, blah. Die Hard 4 and 5, despite the fact that it never shows him being like this horrible, horrible father, the way that it's both movies start with like either of his kids not wanting to talk to him implies that he is just a monster as a father. But we never actually see any of that though, so we just have to accept that he is terrible.
What gets me the most is that Die Hard 4 explicitly, very clearly says that he is some level of a helicopter parent. That like he's coming in and checking on his daughter like constantly and like is intruding on her life, and she wants to get away from that as much as possible. This movie explicitly says he was never there. He never was able to spend time with his kids and never checked in on them. It's not that far apart. You could have watched the movie, guys. Also, I mean, it is a 6-year difference between the movies, but like I also like to think that once there is that end of movie 4, he gets on good terms with the daughter to some extent, to the point where she is around and like on good terms at the beginning of this movie. You would think the son would just follow suit. You would think the son would just be a thing of like, oh, and I'm also talking to your brother because, you know, I have 2 kids. This isn't like you just lost track of the 7th one. This is 2 kids.
Yeah, it's also like, it is weird that like Holly isn't around at the end of this movie.
Full spoilers, I was fully expecting her to show up because of the way that like all the lights and like smilingness was happening at the end. I was like, and then they pan over and stepping out of the car, the original actress for Holly. But nope.
It's so weird that she isn't, because it doesn't sound like. Well, why? Anyway, like we're very getting spoilers because I don't want to talk around anything anymore.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want? Yeah, I will say there is some absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I don't think there's anything on the level of scale of the highway stuff from 4.
Right.
But there's some ridiculous bullshit in this movie with action scenes, and I remember some of them from in the trailer. I'd forgotten them, but when they popped up in the movie, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that 10 times in the trailer before the movie came out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give the movie that much credit in that when I picture the over-the-top action scene, it is the car flipping over on the highway and them like having to duck underneath. Like that's the peak for me in terms of it's too much. This one brings it back a little bit, but there are certainly some sequences here where you could tell they wanted this to be the big thing, and ultimately it just kind of felt soft to me. Like it was like, okay, I guess if that's what you really want to. So like there's a whole big moment in this where they make a big deal of shooting out the glass windows above the enemy, and they spend a good 20 seconds showing like slow motion glass falling. And I'm like, could have spent that time just shooting the enemies. Like it didn't. I get there's a strategic battle thing here, but like it doesn't matter because then you just stand up and shoot the enemies.
I mean, there is some awful CG towards the end, but my bigger problem with the action scenes in this is that, and it happens twice in this movie, is there's times when our hero/heroes will jump not knowing that there'll be anything to save them, but are just miraculously saved because of something that will break the fall of some kind. And you could solve it simply by showing one character looking out there and establishing, hey, thing is here, so they know that they're jumping to safety or that they've got a chance of surviving. Instead, they look like idiots because they're just risking, oh, we'll just jump out of this window that's like, 8 stories up and just hope for the best.
Look, if there's one thing I know about Russia, it's that there's always a little vendor market underneath, and you just crash into the little canopies they got going on there.
So yeah, characters are just more stupid. It's more of a dumb action movie, despite the fact that it's presenting itself in this ultra serious way. And I will say, again, we're not in spoilers yet, so I won't say what it is, I won't hint at anything. I will just say one of the things I forgot about this movie is where the third act takes place. I did not remember that. We're going to have some words about where this goes.
Look, it is 100% just a consequence that you and I are both far more educated on this topic than we were when this movie came out.
That is definitely true. That is absolutely true. So I'm able to call out some bullshit a bit more. But there is like one element of it that I'm sure pissed me off just as much at the time. There's one little thing.
Oh yeah, I know what you're saying.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll just say they retcon a real piece of human history to be the fault of a villain in this, and I'm just going to say that it's laughably bad, and we'll get into it more later.
That entire sequence is just like, why would you choose to put it here if you had to change so much about everything about it?
Yeah, it's just absolutely baffling. And it just makes some of the stuff that happens in the third act just more bullshit, because I'm like, well, isn't this a problem? Isn't that a problem? No, it's not.
Nah, not at all. We've got magical goo that fixes things.
All right, spoilers for A Good Day to Die Hard. You have been warned. We didn't even talk about Jai Courtney that much, but don't worry, we'll talk about him a lot as we go through the spoilers. So
I don't have a massive hatred for Jai Courtney as like an actor. Like, I don't feel like I've seen him in enough stuff to really gather that much of an opinion, but everything I've seen him in has been bad independently of him as well.
Well, I mean, part of it obviously is just the writing, but he's such an unlikable dick in this. Like, he's just aggressive in how much he hates his dad, and he's just always so serious. Like, he's thoroughly unlikable. There's not a likable quality to him. There's kind of a black hole where the charisma's supposed to be. And that was also true in Terminator Genesis, right? People seem to like him as Captain Boomerang in, like, the Suicide Squad movies, but...
Well, you say movies, like spoilers for Suicide Squad. The first one, he's in it, and that movie sucks. The second one, he dies in the first 2 minutes. So...
Oh, true. But, I mean, I'll be honest, I even remember that he died that early. I just remembered him being there again. But, yeah. So, I like... For some reason, around this time period, 2013 to 2015, they really wanted to try and make him the next action star. And that's the sad part about this movie, is the hope. The hope of this movie was that it was a hit, and that people were going to latch on to Jack McClane, and that we could have a whole new set of Die Hard movies about Jack McClane. And no, this movie bombed. It did terribly critically. Everyone hated it.
They even did the thing at the end, and like, God, I was so pissed off when they did this. They did the thing where they were like, oh yeah, remember, my name's not actually Jack McClane, it's John McClane Jr. And I'm like, do you want to go ahead and pick up Shia LaBeouf's hat off the ground and just almost put it on, and then all of a sudden
that's it. That's what they were hoping for.
Yeah.
And it's just it's so baffling. And it's actually the funny thing is that the last movie, one of the few positives we had for it was, and this is again a credit to Mary Elizabeth Winstead, is that she doesn't get a lot to do, right? But what little she got to work with, one of the positive things we said was, the few times Lucy shows that she's capable of, to give her a chance to actually show that she's learned some stuff from her dad and she's strategic and whatever. And we said, that's something we could have explored more. It's so like double slap in the face that this movie is like, yeah, she's here, but we're just going to push her to the side and we're going to focus on this boring, bland guy who we want to be the new star, but is painfully uninteresting and actually screws up repeatedly.
Yeah.
And of course, like, he's meant to be good at what he's doing. He's meant to be this hot shot, and he sucks.
I'm okay with him screwing up as long as it feels like it is a consequence of the enemy being smarter. But like, he screws up because stuff out of his control and his dad is being even stupider than he is.
Yep, it's a rough time. So we're in spoilers, just to clarify that again.
Yes.
So the entire opening section of this movie is the belief, right? Because it plays out through the opening titles, right? So some vague backstory here because I don't want to get into it too specifically because I don't care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's an evil politician man in Russia who is setting up this other Russian who's already imprisoned on this trial, but this other Russian wants to like testify against the politician, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, and he's like, no, I'm not going to let you talk. You're not going to spill all my secrets, right? So during the opening titles, Jack goes to a nightclub and assassinates someone. He shoots him in the head. So that's how we start. This is our introduction to Jack McClane. Is he in cold blood assassinates someone by shooting them in the head? And it's all a ploy, it turns out, so that he will be in the courtroom with this guy, whose name was Yuri, I think?
Yuri Komarov.
Yuri Komarov, right? Right. So he's like the quote-unquote sympathetic guy who wants to turn in the main villain, and that's who the main villain's trying to kill throughout the movie.
During the opening scene of this movie, as the main villain comes to his little cage, and it's just like, you're never going to be able to testify. I will make sure that does not happen. Our sympathetic man is playing with a chessboard. And as he's playing with this chessboard, it's just him in there. So he's moving one pieces, and what do you know? He stops and he spins the chessboard around, and he moves the other one, almost as if to symbolically tell the audience with a sledgehammer to the face that he's playing both sides. What? I saw that happen visually, and immediately I was like, okay, so he's evil. Like, that's the turn. He's the bad guy. And wouldn't you know it, 90 minutes in, hey, look, they're not even 90, 60 minutes in. There it is.
Are you telling me they were foreshadowing?
No, that's not foreshadowing in the first 1 minute of your movie. This is literally the first shot of the movie of him moving around this chessboard. That's not foreshadowing. That's just like, I don't get me wrong. I'm not expecting a lot of intelligence from the average person who's going in to see Die Hard 5, but like, that was too much. It was too much of just like, and now we've ruined the twist. Here you go.
Yeah. But we'll come back to that much later, because that's a whole other topic here.
It is.
Right? So Jack goes to a nightclub as the opening titles are finishing and assassinates some dude in the head. The context of who this guy was, I'm sure it was explained in here.
I think he was just some random gangster. But the thing is that when he's being arrested, he's like, look, put me on trial. I will testify against was it the dude in charge? Was it the politician guy, or was it Yuri?
I think it was the politician guy. I think that I mean, it doesn't really matter. The whole point is that he wants to be in the courtroom with him so that he can get to him and ultimately protect him, because the reveal, of course, like half an hour in, if it's even that long, is that Jack is actually undercover from the CIA. And the Americans are trying to get to this guy Yuri because they want the file that he has. So this is the thing. Introducing the MacGuffin of the movie. If you enjoy people saying they want the file,
Give me the file. Where's the file? Gotta get the file.
You'll love the first hour of this movie because it's all they talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so you're revealing that he's doing this as a good guy, right? And he's there to protect Yuri. Now, the question is what was going to happen, though? Because the bad guys bombed the courthouse to try and get to Yuri, right? So the main henchman bad guy, who is named Alec. Yeah, Alec. A-L-I-K, but I'll just call him Alec for lack of a better pronunciation. So, Alec and his team, which also includes sexy, badass lady Irina, who was also introduced during the opening credits as being kind of romantically involved with Alec, right?
Yes.
Right. But,
also angry about that.
I know what you're angry about, but we'll talk about it when we get to it, right?
I know.
Right? So, they bomb the courthouse because they're going to try and get to Yuri because they want to force him to give up the file and then presumably kill him. All on behalf, they're all working for the politician guy. So obviously when this happens, Jack grabs Yuri and says, I'm here to protect you. Come with me if you want to live. No, that's the other bad sequel that he was in. But he takes him and he's going to drive off them. But my question is, okay, but what was the plan if these villains didn't bomb the courthouse? Like, were you just going to chat to him while you were both sitting in the penalty box together? Like, what was what was the plan here?
I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of like in-universe thing of like, oh, the CIA knew that there was going to be an attack, so that's why he had to be there that day in that cell or something like that. But it's not in the movie. It's 100% making that up.
You were saying they're expecting something, so he's there in place to protect them when that happens. Okay, fine. I'll roll with it, right? So, while the cartoon, obviously we'll go back and talk about John, but I just want to say one more thing about the CIA stuff because this really pissed me off. In terms of filmmaking, the part of the movie that annoyed me the most visually was when it started cutting to like the CIA control room because they were controlling like drones and stuff. Yeah. And oh my god, the amount of zooms and like out of focus and like an in out of focus and like we're doing that gritty documentary thing, but we're doing it at like times 10 speed. What the hell was this?
It's supposed to be this high tension scene because apparently whatever person they're supposed to meet up with and like deliver Yuri to is not there. So everyone's scrambling. But like, yes, exactly what you're saying is that someone just walked in, grabbed the little zoom bar on the lens and just went whee as fast as they possibly could.
It's like, this room with computers isn't exciting enough. We have to jazz it up with camera work.
Here's a little hint for you. There's the exciting side of the military operations, and then there's logistics. If you don't want to show the logistics side, don't. Like, just have him get on the line, say, where's my guy? They say, not there, the mission's scrapped, and you're done. Like, you didn't need this whole extra sequence off to the side.
The thing is, though, is that I can see what they're going for. They're trying to do Bourne. They're trying to do, like, the 10 scenes in Bourne when they're all talking about where Bourne is. And that's fine. I mean, it's a little trite, but, like, that would be okay. And, yeah, those scenes do have some handheld shaky camera. They have some zoom-ins. They have, like, all these things that this movie's also doing. Yep. But they're doing them at, like I say, a tenth of the speed. So you can process what you're seeing. This is so, like, as much as I said the editing is better in this than 4, and it is overall, this one little thing it keeps cutting back to for this one scene is so shit that it's kind of like worse than any of the editing in 4 somehow. It's actually really impressive. And it's because they're going for this very specific, like, gritty documentary, like, we're in the war room style shooting, but it's very almost parody levels of, like, what they're doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's a brief sequence. We have it here, and as soon as they say the mission scrapped, we don't ever really cut back to them again. It's all just right here, but it is so just, honest to God, this opening car chase scene, I think may be one of the weakest sequences in terms of stunts throughout the entire Die Hard franchise. I think that this has absolutely no tension to it. Its thrills are not that thrilling, and ultimately it's hard to, like, keep track of everything that's going on as well, because like you're saying, it's all dull grays. It's very desaturated and hard to see, like, okay, which one is this?
Well, we'll come back to the actual contents of the chase in a bit, because let's go back and talk about John's side of all this, because like, I feel like we should have focused on the bad guys for a bit just to explain what the context of all this shit is, because it is a bunch of stuff. So like I say, John's introduction, he's at the shooting range at the police station, and it's all serious close-ups. He's shooting the targets, and he's clearly in a bad mood. And someone comes in with a file and says, "Hey, John, I found your son, and it's not looking good." And he's glancing at it, and it's like, you know,
Can I just say who's the person who came in?
He's a dude from Prison Break, I want to say.
He is the same actor who was the older nephew of Samuel L. Jackson's character in Die Hard 3. Not the same character, but he's the same actor.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. He's one of the very few people who ever returned to a Die Hard movie.
Give him a round of applause, I guess.
I kind of want it to be the same character, though. It's not. He has a different name, but I want it to be just for the sake of, like, look, see? John McClane impacted this kid, and he grew up and wanting to be a cop, and, like, he came from that bad neighborhood. Isn't that good? Isn't that a nice thing?
So, right, all very serious. There's a whole goodbye to Lucy. She's dropping him off at the airport. I don't have much to say about the scene, really. I mean, it's just kind of like, don't make more of a mess of things, Dad. And he kind of smirks, and it's maybe the closest they get in these opening scenes to him feeling like John McClane, because he's like, I won't make a mess. I'm just going to go pick him up. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting here that the entire sequence, even for the audience, is played up at this point that it feels like Jack's lost control of his life, that he is like involved in a mob or drug stuff or stuff like that. It's not supposed to be clear that he is a CIA agent at this point.
Yeah, and that's important. So when John references, the last time we spoke 3 years ago, it went pretty bad, and like it does kind of sound like him, his wife, and his sister all really don't know like what he's into, to the point where John thinks he's in the mafia, or the Russian mob, that he's doing bad stuff, that he's selling drugs, that these are the assumptions they're making.
Yeah.
This is what they think his life is. Which is why when John walks into the safe house after all the car chase stuff, and he goes, oh wait, this is what you've been doing, spy shit? Oh, look at my boy doing spy shit, and he cracks some jokes. I'm like, are you not relieved that your son's not an international war criminal? Is that not a relief to you?
Would have been cooler if he was.
It's such a weird reaction based on what he's supposed to believe in the first, 25 minutes of the movie. Given how bad he thinks his son's life is, and that he needs to come and rescue him, to find out that he's actually doing it for a purpose, and then his reaction is, oh, you're just a CIA? You're an Agent Johnson, practically?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if it was, I'm happy that you're not a drug dealer, you're not in the mafia or anything like that, so be it. But you put that word just in there, and that's the way it feels. It feels like he's disappointed that it ended up being Super Spy. Like, he's cracking jokes and saying like, oh, well, I guess that's okay. Like, he doesn't actually say that, but that's the vibe you get, where it's like, dude, he's going out fighting bad guys. This should be a good thing. What is this weird thing where you're just against him being a spy?
Yeah, the one obviously problem I had with it is just like, okay, can we make a bigger deal of the fact that he had to kill someone in cold blood in the head just to like get his cover going? Like that should be a defining character moment for him, but it's just kind of treated like, no, that was just a setup. We're never going to talk about it.
It's very clear this man was no good. He was sitting in a strip club enjoying women.
Yeah,
had to be killed.
It all boils down to what comes up later, which is, we kill bad guys, and that's okay, right? Hurrah!
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's not what I like about Die Hard at all.
Yep.
So yeah, F you movie. I hate it. So yeah, so John, he's on the plane, looking at the file. He goes to Russia. We get the scene in the taxi.
Skip the scene. Who cares about the scene in the taxi? Is absolutely pointless, except to say this specific road has traffic on it. That's it. That's the whole point.
The Russian taxi driver likes to sing Frank Sinatra. That's what we learn.
Yep. I was thinking like, is that going to come up as like even just a thematic thing where like during the main fight we're going to have a Sinatra song? No. He just likes to sing Sinatra. Yeah,
maybe he'll make a buddy and he'll come and pick them up later when he's saved or something, or anything.
Yeah.
No.
I thought, that's always been a fun thing of, hey, who's the guy that we're going to befriend in Die Hard that's going to be coming up and saving the day? Who's going to be our Al? But no, he's just a taxi driver who's still stuck in traffic to this day, as far as we know.
But he doesn't charge John McClane. So that's something.
Cool. All right, let's follow that to its logical conclusion. Later on in the movie, he bribes that one laundry worker to get his card up for the elevator.
Oh, yeah.
So he wouldn't have had the money if he had to pay the taxi fare. Therefore, this guy's responsible for saving the world.
I mean, how expensive is that taxi going to be? Like, I feel... I'd like to think
the
still have
fare's still
enough.
running as they're sitting there in traffic, so
True.
theoretically infinite if they never move.
I mean, you say that. Do Russian cabs have a meter like American cabs do?
I have no idea.
They may not. And
I'll
Mother
let
Russia,
you know the next time I go to Moscow.
and Mother Russia,
Cab charge. You charge the cab?
the person decides how much they're paying. No, that doesn't work.
Nah.
Anyway, so we get like scenes of like McClane walking through like an angry crowd of protesters outside the courthouse, and again, it's all like slow motion and gritty and tonally just like really weird for a Die Hard movie. But then everything we sort of said goes down. The courthouse explosion happens. So Jack obviously gets Yuri into a van that was prepped for him, and they're going to drive away, and they would be like miles away. And it's only because John like gets in front of the van and stops him and demands a conversation that they get delayed for several minutes. That the bad guys have got time to like see where they are and like are much closer, and it's more of a close chase than it ever would have been. And of course, John steals a truck to give pursuit, even though he's not really involved. And we get one of the most like ridiculous parts of this that I just thought was really silly, which is that one of the bad guys like shoots a rocket launcher at him, and he skids this like flatbed truck around and circles so that the missile goes over the flatbed part and hits whatever else. But he keeps spinning for like a good he spins around like a lot of times.
Yes. I think it ends with him like the front of the truck crashing into some cars, so he goes upside down.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, well, this elderly man has now been killed because, like, he should be. But no, they don't even, like, that's not even an injury for him. He just comes out of it and he's like, I'm good. Just going to steal another car now.
Yeah, he tries to stop some cars. None of them listen. One actually hits him gently, and the guy just starts yelling and rushing at him. And John yells, "You think I understand an effing word you're saying?" And then steals his car. And I'm like, well, of course he assumed you could understand. He doesn't know you're American by looking at you, John. You're also in Moscow.
He should have, though, because this movie 100% goes in on the guy who comes out of his car is wearing an Adidas tracksuit. And I'm like, that's just, at this point, that's just racial stereotyping.
He wasn't, though, was he?
He was.
Was? Okay.
Because I laughed at it. I was like, oh, God, this dude's the most stereotypical Russian.
Fair enough. I did not remember that, but
yep. One thing we kind of skipped over is as John is trying to talk to Jack and Yuri just kind of like wanders off for a second, Jack pulls a gun on John. And is like threatening to shoot him, just being like, "You are messing with things here. You don't understand. Get out of the way." And of course he doesn't, but he threatens to at the very least.
Yeah, again, very aggressive. And even once we find out what was going on, like, why wouldn't Jack just say, "Get in the van"?
Yeah.
That's so annoying to me.
Look, I don't even care if he says get in the van or like piss off or whatever, but like at this point, he's like, "Dad, it's an operation. I need to go do this. This is sanctioned." And then let him go. Like that should be enough.
Yeah. No, it feels super aggressive, and everything about like their interactions for a lot of the movie. Like there's a scene later when they're in the elevator and it's just this weird, like, aggressive son bullshit that I'm just like, if you're trying to make me care about this new character, you are failing. I mean, you're barely making me like John McClane, and I already like him. You're actively harming my opinion of him, but you're not doing any favors with this new guy.
Nope, not at all.
So there's some more flipping and whatnot, because, I mean, the big thing once John gets into another car is that to try and catch up, he has to ride off the side of like the overpass, and he ends up driving down like, what do you even call it, the big like truck that has all the cars on it, like the what do you call
I know
that?
it's I don't have a word for it.
It's a really long truck where all these cars
has, like, ramps.
Yeah, and it's all these cars that are being transported, and he basically drives along the top of that to eventually get back out of the road. It feels like too little to call it a tow truck. Because a tow truck's just one car.
Yeah, tow truck's just the one. It says, what is a truck to transport? A car carrier trailer. That's all it is.
Okay. But I'm sure you've all got an image in your mind. You've all seen one of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's the extension of the Final Destination wood truck, where you just imagine one of them coming off the back and crashing into your car.
Although I don't know if I've ever seen one in person now I'm thinking about it, but I've definitely seen them in movies before.
I wouldn't say I drive by them all the time, but significantly enough that I recognize them.
I may have, I don't know. It's not something I've even took notice of. It's just a normal thing. But yeah, like, so he's driving that. There's like a big truck that's also transporting a big sort of concrete cylinder that the bad guys smash through. Because the bad guys, by the way, their like truck's like an armored vehicle. It's like really tough looking. And that, like, you know, but eventually though, because they're trying to ram into the van that Jack and Yuri are in, John drives up behind and says hello and like knocks into them and eventually makes them go flipping off the road, and that's kind of how it wraps up. And the big dramatic point that's supposed to be here at the end is that Jack's away scot-free with Yuri, but he decides to go back for his dad, who's also, his car's now flipped upside down by the end. It's like he needs to be rescued, so he goes back and angrily tells him to get in the van, and that's how we get to the next part.
Yeah, we get this whole thing. It happens twice. Once when the mission's called off, and then second at this point, where Jack Courtney just starts going off at his steering wheel. He's just like, damn it, McClane, god damn it. And he's talking about his dad, but it's the same thing you were saying before, is that there's this weird thing where he refuses to call him dad, and instead calls him John. But it's even weirder here because he's calling him by his own last name.
Yeah, he calls him McClane a couple times,
Yeah.
He's like, damn it, McClane, that's your name.
Yeah, is there any point here where it says he's going by Guerrero or whatever the name was?
No, there isn't. He never once says he's going by Gennaro, but there is one line later when he says his name's McClane, and John says, oh, it's McClane. He's like, yeah, today it's McClane. I'm like,
right.
You never set this up. You never said that he's going by Gennaro.
Nah.
Which, this is so weird.
Director's cut.
Did either of like Lucy in the last movie or like Jack in this, did either of them like actually legally go by Gennaro? Because technically, by default, their names would be McClane based on when they were born with their married parents, right?
I'm willing to assume that there is a chance that Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Lucy, got her name legally changed over time. But then, yes, it's the issue of you can't just switch back and forth. Like, you can't just say, like, today I'm feeling more McClane. Like, it's one or the other, and you got to stick to it.
I mean, you can go by a pseudonym if you want. Like, there's nothing to say you can't say your name's something, but legally you're still actually using whatever. But it's just so weird that both kids seem to have been doing the exact same thing with their name, and, you know, just very strange.
It was a very weird Thanksgiving back in, like, 2003. And then we've just seen the fallout of that ever since.
But the weird thing about it, though, is this idea of, like, I am not going to use this last name anymore. I'm going to switch to my mother's maiden name. It does feel like, oh, Holly's told them the story of, oh, he got a little bit pissed off because I was going by Gennaro. And they're specifically going out of their way to rile him up. Because it's really weird. Like, I'm not saying no one's ever said, I hate my father, I'm going to switch to my mother's maiden name. I'm going to do that out of some sort of loyalty or something. I'm sure it's happened. But, like, again, how bad has John messed up with these kids that they feel that strongly about it?
Honestly, because of the way you just brought that up there, it strikes me as just one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, remember that thing John got pissed off about in the first movie? Let's do that again. But we don't have Holly. Okay, well, the kids will do it.
Oh, yeah, from a movie writing standpoint, I get why the writers are doing it real shamelessly. But I'm saying from, like, an in-world context of these people, if they're real characters, what like this is so weird that they feel this strongly as people about it.
We literally get an entire conversation. We get an entire thing. It's very shortly afterwards, honestly, where John and Yuri are talking to each other while Jack is off doing whatever. And he's talking to Yuri and basically saying, like, yeah, you know, I messed things up pretty bad with my kids because I worked so much. I kept on working. I didn't pay them enough attention, and I thought working was a good thing, but now I could see that's where I messed up. And Jack's overhearing this, and he gets a little soft spot for his dad at that point. But, like, that seems to be it, which is not him messing up royally. It's him being an inattentive father who's now trying to make up for it. Are you allowed to be pissed? Absolutely. Are you allowed to say, like, oh, I'm willing to change my name or go by Gennaro? Fine, sure. But to put a gun to your father's head, that feels a bit over the line.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he was that bad, right? Overworking, didn't have as much time for them, sure. And probably complicated by the fact that the mother wanted to work and live in a different city. Also, I'm sure, made the distance a bit weird. Like, you could have stayed with us in LA, Dad, and we could have, whatever. Yeah. Like,
Could've
be a family.
You were LAPD for like 3 months.
It was at least a year, probably 2. Yeah. I mean, we don't know how long after Die Hard 2 he went back to New York, but that's something. I mean, that's something that I wish like Die Hard 3 never did. Like, what? I mean, the other movies are fine with just saying John McClane's here on his like Christmas vacation. Like, why not just say, oh, he's back in New York for the summer for something, and then just have Die Hard 3 happen that way? I don't know.
I get what you're saying, and I understand it, but again, I think that back in Die Hard 2, I literally said, I always view him as NYPD. So I think it was just one of those things where like John McClane works at the NYPD. What do we have to do to get him back there?
Yeah, I've
they
never
just
had
decided
this,
nothing.
Yeah, I've just never had this attachment to like he has to be NYPD or it feels wrong. Like it doesn't really matter to me.
Fair enough.
But regardless, anyway. So they get to the safe house. Cole Hauser is like the guy who plays Jack's like partner or superior. Yeah. Not that you have to get used to him or anything, because he is gone by like 30 seconds later. You might remember him, David, from the second Fast and the Furious movie. He was the villain in that.
I remember exactly one thing about that movie, and that is them launching a car onto a boat, and everything else is gone.
It was his boat.
Cool.
There you
Don't
go.
remember him.
Yeah. So his career's going well. He's went from being the main villain in a movie to being here for 30 seconds. So his career is going peachy by 2013.
I mean, to be fair, it looks like he's starring in Yellowstone, which I am hearing
I'm sure
everyone talk about. So
I'm sure that's become like his sort of big break later in life. Like, this is where I can just make money now till I retire. There's just this Yellowstone franchise.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, you're a spy. The Americans want this this knowledge from the file. This whatever this file is that's got evidence on the main bad guy.
So tell us, Yuri, where is the file? I cannot get the file until I get the key. And also my daughter. Oh, cool. 40 more MacGuffins.
Yes, MacGuffin. That's the other thing, is the writing in this just feels so lazy, because it's just, we need the MacGuffin. Except for the fact that this movie's obsessed with having twists about who characters are. So we have the twist quite soon that this daughter that he loves, that he wants to take with him, he'll only agree to work with the Americans if he can take his daughter with him. Oh, she's the sexy bad lady who's working with the bad guys. She's on the bad guys team.
Man, I really wish that there was, a shot at the very beginning that showed her all nuzzled up and cozy with the bad guy in order to completely undersell this twist. Oh, wait, there was.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, we also saw her again at the courthouse. So, like, the movie wanted us to know she's a bad guy. It wanted us to be tense because we know she's a bad guy, even though it's supposed to be a nice reunion scene when they meet her.
I understand that we're supposed to, like, know this by now. My issue is that the scene independently is, like, this thing where John's just kind of, like, eyeing her up. And even then, he doesn't get it. He doesn't, like, come to the realization. Like, I was thinking back to the Die Hard 2, where he just sees, like, literally two people sitting at a table just like with a briefcase sitting there, and that's it, and he manages to catch on that quickly. Here she's doing literally all this crazy stuff and he still doesn't manage to catch it in time.
Yeah, but he smells something's wrong, unlike Jack, who thinks everything's going peachy.
That's true.
John's like, oh, something feels off about this. There's something not quite right here. And he's right. I mean, he doesn't get to the conclusion, but he is right. Something's off.
I guess it's the issue that we didn't get to the conclusion, because I'm sitting there like, okay, are you going to do anything about it? Or are you just going to sit there and be like, I'm telling you, Jack, something's wrong here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the fact that we double twist this later into Yuri also being a bad guy, and that she's been working undercover with the other bad guy for her father so they could double cross the other bad guy. Like that, like all of that is just like whatever, and I hate it. I hate all of it. But but this leads to our next big action sequence when they're here with this meeting to get the daughter and get the key, because this is when the other bad guys show up. Not the main bad guy. He never actually gets involved in the action of the movie. He's this just guy on the phone.
Guy.
Yeah. We're just talking about Alec, the one who's like actually running all the operations. And we get a scene where, like, I think it's supposed to be, this is where John and Jack meet the bad guy and have the one-to-one to, like, build the tension between them. And I hate this scene. For some reason, the bad guy's thing here is that he dances in front of them for, like, a minute and says, I could have been a dancer. And I'm like, are you trying to, like, build some camaraderie with the heroes like Hans Gruber did? Because it's not working.
Yeah, they're trying to give him, like, a quirk of saying, like, oh, see, I am not your common henchman who just does whatever. I have this artistry to me. I have this high art thing.
The other thing, he's eating a carrot. For some reason, he enters this scene just eating a carrot.
This again strikes me as like, okay, we're doing a post-MCU thing where it's like, remember how Robert Downey Jr. would just do things in the scenes and nobody ever, like, told him stop because it just made him more charismatic? People started aping that, but didn't realize that that's not what makes them charismatic. It's being charismatic that makes that work.
He's just munching on a carrot for no reason. And I was like, why are you eating a carrot? You Bugs Bunny mother effer. Like, what is this?
Hey, does a little tap dance, eats a carrot. Now you remember this character for the rest of your life. That's good writing.
I just, like, you can just feel them trying so hard to make him memorable, but it just feels like these random quirks that mean nothing, that don't add to anything. So he punches them around a little bit.
They somehow get some knives and, like, are starting to cut the zip ties.
Well,
and then they do.
No. So don't just gloss over that. Jack gets a knife out of his boot and starts cutting his zip tie. And John notices this and decides to buy him time by laughing at something the villain said for no reason, just to make the villain go, why are you laughing? And they all laugh for like a minute, right? At no point did I ever get the impression that somehow they both had knives to cut themselves loose. Yet, when Jack breaks his hands free because he's cut his zip tie loose, John does as well. And I'm like, wait, did you pass him the knife after you cut yourself loose? I don't understand how you're both free.
No, see, Jack needs to cut himself loose. John is able to just rip out of him. He's just that buff.
He's John McClane, yes. He lives free and dies hard, yes.
Mm-hmm. I had a problem with the laughing scene as a whole because, like, I get what they were going for in that John starts laughing, Jack realizes what's going on, and then they start, like, wordlessly doing this plan in sync. But it's not a plan. Like, if it were a plan that actually had multiple steps and they just kind of figured out based off of each other just sharing a look, I would think, okay, that's a good father-son thing. But this is just, no, we're just buying time. And it's just one step. It's not a father and son moment. It's a gag.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, they fight back a little bit, gunfight, and then, they're hiding behind the bar, they shoot the glass up top. It's just a lot of shooting, and that's all it really is. The big ending of this, though, is that the bad guys have got a helicopter outside. So they've taken Yuri. They've got Yuri now, who we still think's a good guy, or at least sympathetic guy, who's going back and making amends for anything he did in the past, right? Back in the 80s. More on that later. Yeah.
Well, they also do say, okay, I got the key, but the vault that the file is stored in is not here. It's in Pripyat, which for anybody who knows Chernobyl, Pripyat is a very notable place.
Yes. So we're going to Chernobyl, basically. So we'll come back to that.
Yep.
Helicopters firing dozens of rounds into the room. It's basically just them running across the room as they're running from the gunfire. It's just a line just following them of all this glass shattering and bullets. And they just jump out the window at the end of this big sort of bar ballroom floor. They just jump out the window, no idea if they're going to fall to their death. It just so happens that the scaffolding like a floor down because there's people working on the building. Now, they did set up that this building is being renovated, but just one moment of John looking out the window so that we could at least infer that he knew that there was stuff there.
They spend the time earlier saying okay, well, where's the thing? Where's this key at? And he's like, oh, it should be up on the ballroom, but that floor is being renovated, so I don't know anything about if they change stuff. Okay, that floor is being renovated. That does not extend to there's a scaffolding outside this floor.
Yeah.
That does not say that is absolutely going to be there.
Yeah. I mean, I do conceptually there's because they land on the scaffolding and there's the debris or the chute for
dust tube.
Yeah. For them getting rid of all their excess, right, for the builders. There's this dust tube going down, and they slide down this chute, and the helicopters start shooting at the chute. And I thought, do you know what? There's an idea in here. There's an idea for a scene where someone's sliding down this as quickly as they can as they're being shot at. This movie doesn't accomplish doing anything fun with it, but there is an idea here that I could see having potential. But basically, they run away, they get shot or whatever, and that's pretty much it. And this is how short this movie is that the next scene with John and Jack is them patching themselves up and basically saying, hey, like, we could just leave now, right? Like, like your mission's done, you've lost Yuri, like, we could just go home. And Jack's like, yeah, but you're not going to actually just, like, you know, we're committed to this, right? And John's like, yeah, of course we're going to go do something. Let's go be heroes. Let's go be diehards. Let's go kill bad guys. Because this is the scene that pissed me off, where they basically say being a McClane is killing bad guys. Yeah. And I'm like, no, that is not what Die Hard was. And that is simplifying it to the level that an idiot who watches Die Hard goes, oh, it was fun because he was shooting bad guys. Like, it's boiling it down to the most idiotic level, removing all nuance, removing all of what made John McClane special, and just saying it's that. Yeah.
It feels, I mean, from a writing perspective, it is this, but in universe, it feels like John McClane drank his own Kool-Aid. Like, he went through the first 3 Die Hards, and then after that, he's like, I'm sorry, do you know who I am? Google Nakatomi Plaza. Do it now. Like, that's the kind of guy he feels like in this.
Yeah, he's lost whatever, like, everyman quality he had. And he had it in the first 3 movies. All the way up to Die Hard 3, it still felt like John McClane. And then 4, he still kind of feels like there's still parts that are recognizable. It's not completely gone, but it definitely feels like that's where the shift is. And then 5 is just, no, he is just like the shell of what he was, a caricature of what John McClane was. That misses the point of what John McClane was. So
yeah, I also hate this scene just from the viewpoint of it's this weird moment for Jack where he's shocked. He is utterly flabbergasted that the daughter would betray the father. And they just have this moment where John's like, hey, you'll understand when you're older and you have kids of your own. And I'm like, do you think that's a normal thing, John? That your kids are gonna just shoot things at your head? That's not normal.
Shouldn't this make sense to Jack, since Jack apparently hates his father? Like, surely betraying your father would be the most relatable thing for this asshole. But no.
I mean, maybe he's saying of like, but I would never like actually do it. Like, I would threaten it, but I wouldn't actually do it. But she actually did it.
But the implication here with John saying, oh, one day you'll understand, you have kids. I'm like, wait, do you see Jack as having betrayed you with his current life? Like, is that possible. How you feel about that? Because that's kind of weird.
He really hates feds. Like, we cannot stress this enough. He hates feds.
Oh, this is what, everything about this I did not like. But yeah, basically, they go and steal a car that has a ton of guns in it.
Yeah, I just want to say, this is also the part where we get the full backstory of, like, everything that happened.
Okay, so we can talk about that. Okay, so here's the thing, right? So, obviously, the thing from the very start is that Yuri has this file that's got evidence on the politician for something the politician did. We find out here what the politician did, what secret he's trying to actually keep locked up. So, the politician and Yuri worked together in the 80s. And they were siphoning off uranium so it could be turned into weapons. And because they were doing this, they got greedy. And that's what caused Chernobyl. The politician in this movie is responsible for Chernobyl. It wasn't something that happened because it was, they built the plant cheaply. And this, a series of dominoes led to this tragedy, which we all learned in the great TV miniseries Chernobyl. Go watch that. Really good.
Let's talk about that for 10 minutes again. I will always do that.
Oh, yes, comrade. Yes.
Yes.
Anyway.
Great to see you, comrade.
So that just, like, obviously, like, if you know anything about Chernobyl, you're like, wait, it's a weird thing to compare it to, but this is like when they say someone's responsible for blowing up Krypton. I'm like, no, it's more interesting if it's like something that society failed as a whole. But this is actually a real thing where we actually have figured out what caused Chernobyl. We know it. And it's more interesting than just, no, some villain was doing something shady and caused it.
Every once in a while, there'll be like a sci-fi show that like taps into the like mysteries of like, you know, there's like the Roanoke colony that went missing in America. There's, you know, ghost ships that just vanished off the, even more recently, like Flight 380, whatever. Like there's stuff that just cannot be explained. And to then say, oh, it was this singular entity's fault. But usually it's like sci-fi stuff. To have this, which is completely figured out and not even about the grade of uranium that was used, and then to specifically say it was also our guy specifically, it's just this historical revisionism that feels like, oh, okay, so you didn't check anything at all. Like you heard about Chernobyl and you thought, oh, well, there's a way you could rewrite this plot where he's still responsible, but like not by siphoning the uranium. He's just someone who called a shot way higher up and they just buried it deeper.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, you'd have to know more about it, and it helps that we've seen the Chernobyl show, but like, he's the guy that said, no, get the cheaper rods. Like, if he was that guy, but that's the thing, it wouldn't be something that it would expose him, because no one would care, because obviously everyone in those positions back then were untouchable, but...
He needed to be the one who, like, called in and said, you have to run these tests tonight or else anything else. But we know who did that, and it wasn't him. It's so weird. It's like someone saying like, yes, we know exactly who actually managed to vote for this person into office. It's like, okay, but like those are public records. That's just something we clearly... Where do you think you're getting this conspiracy from, guys? Because it's already been figured out.
Yeah, but even if he was the guy that made that call or that decision, would it actually be that much of an... would it...
No, you know, that's the other thing about this is that like they keep on playing the Russian aspect as like it's basically America, where like, oh, we always want to do the right thing and we're just waiting for some journalist or some fact to come out. We'll blindly trust it and we'll say, yes, clearly we must get justice for that thing. But that's not how it's going to, like, this is Russia. This dude's in a political position of power. He's just going to bury it. Like, it doesn't matter how they try to publish it. It's not going to matter.
Yeah, that doesn't make any real sense from top to bottom. But, of course, this means we're going to Chernobyl. We're going to do the third act of this movie in Chernobyl. That is where they're driving to.
1,000 other problems that they just hand wave away.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So the villains get there. They're in hazmat suits, right? They're in full protective gear. They're taking readings and whatnot. And then John and Jack are going there. And I'm like, wait, are you guys not going to have any protective gear? And then it turns out that the villains only had protective gear because they were getting into the vault, which they suspected would be more radioactive than everything else. Even though I'm pretty sure all the buildings they're walking through are pretty unsafe to be just lounging around in. Anyway, but it's like... But they literally went into the vault, they say, yeah, like the radiation in here has been sealed, so it's like really bad, which I'm not sure that even makes sense, that statement in and of itself.
They said the radiation was pooling there, which, I don't buy.
Yeah.
Nah.
But then they just spray stuff on it to say this will get rid of it, and I'm like, no!
Okay, all right. No! I just Googled this. Apparently, there is a compound 27-4, that can remove some amount of radiation from water sources.
Well, from water? Oh, that's very specific.
Yes. And they're just spraying it on things, and then all of a sudden, all of the radiation in Chernobyl just disappears.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we can take off our suits now. And I'm like, okay, I don't, like, no.
This person was on the Prometheus crew way back in the day. It's just like, we're safe. Just take off all of our suits, whatever.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So even if I buy that it's safe to walk around, and technically it might be okay to walk around a little bit in Chernobyl if you don't hang around too long, depending on where you go. That might be true. I'm not sure. I'd have to fact check that. I tell you right now, going into a swimming pool that has been full of water since the Chernobyl incident happened, and just getting out as if everything's okay, no, that water is deadly.
he makes the comment as he gets out of the water saying, "It's okay. It's just rainwater." And I'm like, yeah, for how long, bro? It's been raining since the 80s.
Yes. No. No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Yeah.
And that's the other thing about this, like, nothing. There is nothing in this sequence besides the visuals that they wanted to use that force it to be at Chernobyl. Because the whole reason they're here is that there is a nuclear stockpile that they have just kept around here. And apparently, because it's in Chernobyl, that's what was keeping it secret. Because they're thinking, oh, that's just normal radiation stuff. But, like, you could just put it in any lead anything and be the exact same situation.
Well, the thing that pisses me off about this is that it's like, okay, so Alec, right, starts like yelling at Yuri, and then he gets shot in the head by Yuri's daughter, and it reveals, oh, Yuri's a bad guy, and they've been playing him the whole time, and they're actually a loving father and daughter, right? And it turns out that there's no file, it was all just a fake MacGuffin, because he wanted to get here to get this uranium so they can sell it and make money. So they've went out of their way to try and make it like the other diehards, where it's like, oh no, this is all just about making money at the end, even though they're not actually robbing gold or bonds or anything, they're just robbing uranium.
Yeah.
And like, there's even a line that points it out where Jack's like, wait, so this is just about money? And John's like, when is it not just about money, Jack? Come on now. And I'm like, oh, come on. Like, I just...
Wink, 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 wink.
Of all the things that they felt compelled to keep Die Hard 4 and 5, this is what makes it Die Hard to us, is that it turns out the villain just wants to get money. I'm like, don't get me wrong, that's a great part of Die Hard, but that's not what makes it feel like Die Hard. Like, yeah. There's so many other things that make it feel like Die Hard, but for some reason, this is like the one thing you've adamantly kept.
It's the same sort of thing of like, oh yeah, remember from the first movie, Gennaro, that was a thing, but now the kids do it. It's the same thing where it's like, well, the part that everyone likes is the fact that they pretend to be terrorists, but they're actually just thieves. Okay, if you can do something new and creative with that, go for it. But this isn't new or creative. This is the same exact thing over and over again.
Yeah, I just, like... I'm baffled at all of this. Anyway, like, this all plays out, and then eventually John and Jack come in. They kill a couple of guards or whatever, but they come in and they find Yuri on his own, and Yuri pretends that, oh yeah, the bad guys will be back any second now. Help me, father, son, my friends.
We will go get the file. For some reason, I haven't gotten the file yet. Oh well, let's go.
And then immediately, both John and Jack are like, something's fishy here. It's almost like Jack has learned from John's earlier skepticism, and this time he's not going to be fooled, and he's like, wait a minute, you're not going to get a file. Stop right now, Yuri. But then, of course, like, the daughter shows up, and the firefight breaks out, and, you know,
we do get a little subsequence here where Yuri calls up the politician dude on the phone as he's getting a massage.
Oh, yes.
And he's like, I've actually been in control of this the whole time. And we see the massage therapist start choking out the politician to the point where he dies.
So the villain who was supposed to be the villain this whole time, the real big bad this whole time, is not the real big bad. This other guy is the real big bad, and I just don't care. I don't give a shit. Like, none of them have been interesting enough to care about.
I honestly thought it would be a lot more difficult for me to keep track of the names of the real big villain and Yuri, but then I realized the real big villain doesn't actually do anything, so we don't need to know his name.
It doesn't matter. He's just a politician. He's a plot point and nothing more.
Look at that. There goes Senator MacGuffin right down the road. Wow.
I'm pretty sure they're not called senators in Russia, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't want to say comrade. They felt like they had to be higher than that, but maybe.
Yeah, I think comrade's something they all... I mean, well, I don't know if they still do, but back in the day, certainly comrade, they were thrown around willy-nilly.
What is a politician in Russia? I'm not getting an easy thing.
I'm sure there's some funny answers to that question, but...
Yeah. That's just a setup to a joke. What's a politician in Russia? Ah, dead.
Well, that's a journalist in Russia.
Right. I'm not getting any good answers here. It's just president, which is obviously Putin, and then a bunch of ministers.
Yeah.
So maybe minister, I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, no, I was so bored throughout all of this. And I'm not even just talking about the third act. I'm talking about the fact of like everything after the moment where John stops the car
Yeah.
And like that whole car chase happens. I'm like, there's a car chase happening, but I couldn't care less. And then the rest of the sequences happen.
I'll be honest,
couldn't care less.
I'm pretty sure during the once they meet up with the daughter and we get the whole firefight there, I'm pretty sure that section, when I saw it in theaters, I fell asleep for like 10 minutes.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't blame you either.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I fell asleep in the theater when I saw this back in the day.
So it's not even that it's uninteresting. Like, yes, it is uninteresting.
I mean, it is uninteresting. Let's not say it isn't, because it is.
But like, it's this special level of bland, and you know it's not going to matter. Like, these are action scenes that going into it, you know that nothing is going to be said and nothing is going to be changed, where if you cut this entire scene out, you're still going to be able to understand the story.
It's not funny bad, right? It's a depressing like version of bad, and that's it's really the saddest possible option in a lot of ways, because it's not even like, because as much as it's probably more interesting to talk about because I can get angry about depressing and bad, but even like a bland, just okay, like you can tell they were kind of trying, but we're just not good enough to actually do anything proper. At least they're kind of like what we were saying about Die Hard 4, I guess, is that at least I felt like some people in the chain actually did care and just weren't good at it or something. Here it just feels like everything's phoned down. I mean, this is probably a good time to bring in who the director is. So John Moore directed this. And I looked up to see what else has he done. And he did Max Payne in 2008. He did the remake of The Omen in 2006, which I saw not too long ago. And that movie is just as boring and just feels as nothing as this. And that's actually a remake of an earlier movie. But it's just a checklist of, we're doing this scene again. We're doing this scene again. And you feel nothing throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
This is a director here who, admittedly, he's not got that many movies, but what he has done is, like, I want to say people are somewhat positive on Behind Enemy Lines, which was way back. That was his first movie, actually, in 2001.
That's what allowed him to keep getting credits.
He did Flight of the Phoenix in 2004, which I saw back in cable around that time, and I remember it just being fine. Like, I don't remember it being particularly bad or good, but yeah, I mean, the Omen remake and Good Day to Die Hard is an absolutely damning like pair of movies. So.
And then there's a Pierce Brosnan movie called IT, which I don't even remember existing. That's
from 2016, and it's got that guy from Scream Queens, I think. I think that's who's in the picture. I can't see his name in the cast, so it doesn't really matter. But John Moore's not made a movie since 2016, and I can only hope that he continues to not making movies, because everything I've seen from him has not been even like mediocre. It's all been depressingly bad and like just soulless stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. I honest to God, like we got in talking about this movie right up to the absolute climax of like action scene in this movie, and we just stopped and we went off to do something else here in talking about this. That should say something about how interesting this movie really is, because we can't be bothered to finish.
Yeah, I mean, they split up. I mean, like the daughter of the bad guy, Arena, I think we've said her name up until this point, she's just been the sexy bad lady, but she is in the helicopter to try to fly away with the uranium, and John sort of like jumped out of the back of that to try and get to her, whereas Jack is chased Yuri onto a roof. So she's trying to shoot at Jack at one point here, and like it's this sort of ultra dramatic thing they're going for, where she's literally turning the chopper as it's like firing a minigun across the roof, and it's going to hit Jack, and it's like, he's about to get to him. And the thing John does to save his son is, there's a truck in the back of this big chopper. He chains it to the chopper, gets in the truck, and says, "The shit we do for our kids, yippee-ki-yay, mother effer," and then drives the truck out the back of the chopper, completely like pulling the chopper back down, and sends the machine gun fire into the air. And he dangles in that for a bit before he eventually... There's a whole big dramatic moment where it's actually... Some of the stuff here is actually some of the worst effects of the whole movie.
Yeah,
the CG of him dangling off this truck as the chopper's swinging around, and then eventually the big slow motion shot of him like coming in through a window of one of the buildings to relative safety, I guess, is really rough stuff.
Yeah, no, this whole sequence again, it's this feeling of you have done nothing in this movie to show me that any injury is going to matter. During that sequence when they were going through the construction stuff, they showed that Jack got impaled by a piece of rebar. Like, he had a metal pole through his stomach. And what do? They crack jokes for a little bit, and he says, all right, yank it out. They yank it out, and they never talk about it again. Like, it doesn't matter. These people are immortal. So when you're telling me that he's dangling off a truck, off a helicopter loaded with uranium around Chernobyl, I'm saying, yeah, he'll probably make it home by dinner.
Yeah, and I don't even remember how Jack ends up with them again, but they end up both jumping at the same time for the big, like, the big shot.
Well, you skipped over the death of Yuri, which is Yuri's got Jack at gunpoint and says, like, hey, check it out. Your dad's gonna die. He's not gonna see you die. And Jack says, yeah, well, neither will you. And he throws Yuri off the building, and I swear to God, they tried to do a shot for shot of Hans Gruber falling.
Yeah, they do that, except the difference here is the back propeller of the helicopter spins round and chops him up as he's falling. Yep. Which is a fun idea on paper. Like, I like the idea of that, but I think the problem I have with this moment, though, is again, like, how in cold blood this felt. Because this wasn't like, I have to kill the bad guy because he's about to do something bad. Or even, like, an emotional moment where he's really earned it and we can kind of be on his side for killing him. Like, again, it feels really aggressive the way he's like, well, neither were you. And he, like, pushes him over to the edge and throws him over the edge of the building. It feels really, like, I don't know, unlikable still, somehow.
I think the biggest issue I have here is that who are the good guys here? Like, as a side, who are the good guys? Because you have the politician who we established at the beginning is the bad guy. And then you have Yuri, who we have learned over the course of this is also a bad guy. So in reality, the only side...
Hold on. Actually, this is, I think, what you're getting at here, but I'm going to, like, spin it around and phrase it a slightly different way.
Okay.
Yeah, who are John and Jack as well, I guess, but so John McClane in this movie, who are the good people that he is saving by getting involved here?
Yep.
Instead, it's really just about going to stop something that's vaguely happening that the CIA is interested in. But there's no one, I mean, okay, down the line, potentially, yes, some bad guy may have a nuclear bomb because of this thing happening, but there's no one an immediate threat. There's no hostages. You know, and 4, it wasn't necessarily great, but, like, yeah, the entire country's kind of, like, been brought to its knees. But especially in 1, 2, and 3, 1, the party of hostages. 2, all the people on the planes. 3, a school is going to get blown up, and potentially other parts of the city as well. But certainly the school is the big thing. Where is that in this? Like, there's no one that is actually being saved. Like, John and Jack are here, and it's not actually affecting any, like, good people anywhere else, whether or not they pull this off. In the short term, at least. Maybe down the line, eventually, but...
You could say that for any of them. I mean, even if you went to, like, Die Hard 3 with him buying his own country and his own military and all that. Like, absolutely. But here's the issue, is that John, in the context of the movie, it's Jack. Jack is the one he's going to save, but then Jack is immediately made as competent as John and therefore does not need any saving. So in the end of this, they're literally the only thing that justifies, quote unquote, them killing Yuri and all these other people so brutally is they lied to us and we didn't quite like that.
Well, here's the thing. See, when they say, oh, we're not going to just go home, let's go and, like, you know, finish this mission or whatever. See if they phrased it as, oh, Yuri... Let's say they actually spend time having John and Yuri bond a little bit for more than that one scene, and maybe it's like, hey, he's a good man, try to do something right, let's go and do this to save him because he deserves to be saved. And then maybe the fact that he turns out to be a villain might really hurt them because that he was the sole reason they went to go and, like, help him. That was their real main moral goal. Yeah, that could have maybe turned into, like, actual drama. I still think it'd be
too brutal, like, because if they're hurt by it, be it. But I think that level of death that they show him getting here is too brutal for that. It's only for the audience's sake because we see what a monster he was.
I get what you're saying, but I'm saying just from, like, a motivation point of view, it would at least give them some sort of noble motivation to go and interact and get involved in the third act in the first place. I mean, obviously, like, how they kill him afterwards because they're pissed at him just feels spiteful at that point. but at least it would give them some kind of like, oh, there's someone good to go and save, even if it's just one person. It's at least some reason for us to latch on to as to why we should root for them trying to accomplish something here. Other than just, no, we're pissed because they won, so we're going to go win now. And that's it. There's no one to save.
Yeah, that's it. When you were saying their motivation before of when John comes in, it's just like, oh, what, we're going to go home now? We're going to put up our slippers, we're going to get our blankies and whatnot. And Jack's like, of course we're not going to do that. We're going to go in there and we're going to finish the mission. It's like, okay, but like, what's the mission here? Because the mission, as you described it before, is they need to file. America needs the file. Okay, fine, cool, do it. But the moment it's revealed that there isn't a file, they needed to have a separate motivation set up as to why should they now be pissed this much at Yuri that it leads to his death. And they don't. They have nothing. So this whole fight scene is literally just self-preservation at that point, and it feels overly cruel and brutal to see him die that way.
Yeah. So that happens, and then
the daughter gets all pissed off and cries about it, and she goes to crash the helicopter into the two McClanes for revenge for her father.
And they just jump out the window to like escape it. So we get this ridiculous slow motion shot of them falling through multiple floors as the helicopter like is falling in time, like in the background behind them.
I was expecting this is where they needed to put the classical music that Die Hard keeps pulling back. They need to have some classical music here as we get the super slow motion descent into the pool. Because,
bizarrely, all the Die Hard sequels do use the main sort of Die Hard theme motifs. Like, it's here again. Like, you can hear it throughout the soundtrack. Yeah. So, I mean, credit for that, I guess. But it doesn't really help anything else. But, like, it's just this big over-the-top CG thing. And then it's just them walking and talking about the fact that, oh, your name's actually John Jr. Yeah, which makes you John Sr., old man. This is after, but they land in the swimming pool, by the way. When they jump from the helicopter, they land in the swimming pool, which totally wouldn't be radioactive.
No, he has super cancer. We've all seen Chernobyl. We know what happens over the next 3 days. He will not make it back to America.
And then there's no dialogue for the final scene. It's just slow motion of them getting out of a plane in the US. Lucy's there and comes up and hugs them, and they walk against the sunset in slow motion, and it's a super saccharine moment to end on. And which also feels really out of place in a Die Hard movie for one, but I guess but the end is whatever, because like, okay, I guess they got escorted back with like CIA because Jack's CIA, but there were several moments in this movie where I'm thinking like, John, you can't just go home. Like all the like car wrecks you've caused, all the bad guys you've killed, like how, like they're not just going to let you get on a plane with all these injuries. But of course, it's a private CIA flight, so I guess whatever.
I mean, I'm also just going to put out there, I don't think that they should have let John McClane into Russia. Like that should, there has to be a level of, oh, hey, John McClane, it says here you're on the no-fly list because of mass destruction of property. So,
I mean, I have no idea what customs is like in Russia when you're going into the country.
Yeah, fair. They're just like, oh, you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Isn't that the Hotel California?
Yeah, one or the other. It's either Russia or the Hotel California.
At least that sounds like a lyric in that song, the way you said it.
Yeah.
This movie is bafflingly bad and just mean-spirited in its tone and how like vindictive the characters are, and they're not really like saving anyone, so there's nothing to really root for. Bruce Willis is phoning it in. Jai Courtney's character is just unlikable. He's got no charisma.
I like how you and I both clarified at one point of Jai Courtney's character, because it's so easy to just fall into like Jai Courtney's just unlikable.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of is, to be honest, but like, but like, regardless, in the context of this movie, his character is unlikable. I don't hate the villains enough, or I don't find them entertaining to watch. Their one attempt to make Alec, who ends up being someone who's killed, earlier than usual because he turns out not to be the real villain.
Yeah,
like his one attempt at trying to have some character just falls completely flat, and everything's presented in this ultra. We want to be gritty and like ultra desaturated, and it's like a war movie, and its tone and its feeling, and like all of it just leaves such a bad taste in your mouth. Like I despise this on a level that even Die Hard 4 doesn't get close to. Like this is actually like an insult to what Die Hard is supposed to be in every single way.
I mean, I'm just looking. It's 90 minutes. That's the part that gets me. It's a 90-minute long movie, and I'm looking through, just hovering over the scroll bar here, and like the explosion that instigates the whole thing happens around the 15-minute mark. I couldn't really tell you that much. Like, what takes up 15 minutes prior to that point?
The opening titles, because they keep cutting to like exposition of like introducing some of the villains and the eventual assassination. The opening titles last a while.
Yeah, that's fair. And then the car chase takes another 15 minutes. And then from there up until we meet Alec and he does his whole thing, we start the next fight scene. That's another 15 minutes. The fight scene from that point on takes about 10, 15 minutes. We get that little moment of him being calm with the dad after that point. And then from there, it's Chernobyl. And that just eats up the last half hour of the movie. And I can't think of anything that is inherently cuttable. But at the same time, I don't want it to be any longer. So I really guess I just mean I don't want this movie to exist. I think that it's just flawed in concept.
Yeah, like, that's the thing. Well, I made a couple of suggestions to improve things slightly here or there. Fundamentally, I think the base concept for this movie is just a mistake. I think this is a bad idea for a Die Hard movie. And, I mean, John jokingly saying he's on vacation like 5 or 6 times is whatever. It doesn't change the fact that he intentionally went here to get his son. And of course, it's just all this bollocks plot of his son being involved in like, spy shit, to quote McClane's actual line. I'm like, why is it so hard to just have a simpler plot, right? A simple Die Hard plot. If you have to make another one, which you didn't, right? Honestly, like, there didn't need to be a single sequel to Die Hard, but certainly after 3, there didn't need to be a comeback. And this attempt at doing this modern take on Die Hard, like, it's
the same sort of problem that, comic book industry gets into every once in a while, which is you get a period of comics where everything has to be bigger. Like, we start off with whatever event, it's Justice League versus Suicide Squad, whatever. You get 3 or 4 events down the road, you're fighting God. And it's like, okay, where do we go from there? And it's the same sort of thing where, okay, we started with a hotel. We started with this plaza being taken over, this business. Okay, next up is a plane. Next up is the city of New York. Next up is the entire United States. Next up is the world. Like, you can't tell a personal story beyond a certain level of stakes. And I think that they bypassed that once it was the United States as a whole, let alone now all of Russia and the world is at stake. I just, like, especially since, like, you do the John Wick thing, and not in the sense that he, like, comes out of retirement for revenge, but the old man John McClane story is so easy. You have him be at something with his family, and because it is kind of meant to harken back to the original a bit more, you make it a bit more simple. It's just the location, whether it's a building, a boat, whatever, take your pick, right? Die Hard can be on anything like that. But you have him with his family, maybe actually say that he's actually found a way to work it out with his wife. He's actually with the whole family. And because he's old, no one even thinks twice that he'll be a threat. But because it's John McClane, when bad guys show up and do stuff, he goes into John McClane mode and starts sneaking about and doing Die Hard things. It would not be difficult. Now, I'm not saying it would be perfect. I'm not even saying they should do it. I'm just saying that at least that I would understand the attempt of, like, hey, if you want to do the nostalgia Die Hard sequel, that's what you do. You have, like, old man John McClane who's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and, like, hey, can he still do it? Well, it doesn't matter if he can, because he's forced into it. And that was kind of the point of John McClane in the first place, is that he's forced into it. Yeah, that's the entire reason of it being a New York cop. Like, this is not the Marines that are sent in. This is not the strike team force that's sent in. It is your average Joe cop who just happens to be there. That's what, like, this whole issue here is with him seemingly being Superman, is that it doesn't feel like he is the average Joe. It feels like he's lost the John McClane-ness of it all. Like, again, I think the reason that 2 and 3 still work is the fact that both of those movies began at the point of he's at the airport. He's just waiting for his family to land. Totally average thing. He woke up after a hangover and he's just, like, needs a little bit of coffee to wake himself up. It feels like, okay, this is just a guy who was put in these situations. By the time you hit these movies, it doesn't feel like he's a guy anymore, because he's someone who can just walk into traffic in Russia and stop a car like that. He's lost his piece there. That being said, with your suggestion there of, he's just shows up, he's forced in the situation, his old man John, like, I'm down for all that, but for the love of God, don't make it a thing where they draw attention to how old he is.
Oh yeah, no, I like have it play into the plot in a way where like they disregard him because he's just an older guy, he's not going to be a problem, but he's John McClane, so he's going to be a problem. Like, but yeah, right. Don't have constant references to you're an old man now, are your knees okay? Because and I'm not saying I even want this, and certainly it can't happen now because Bruce Willis is retired from acting due to health reasons. But even if he wasn't, I still wouldn't want it. I'm just saying that I at least would understand the attempts of doing a story like that instead of whatever this is.
Yeah, I feel like there's this issue where producers, studios, whoever's making the decisions up top, they're afraid of coming off as unrealistic in some ways, where it's like, is it really realistic that this guy just happens to come across terrorists like every 5 years or so? But then they're totally fine with, but Chernobyl was caused by one guy who was just skimming a bit of uranium off the top. We're fine with that part. It's so strange to me where they put their priorities of where they're going to choose to be realistic in these plot things.
Yeah, it's so funny. It feels like a more old school bad sequel to me, because these days a lot of bad sequels fall into the over. Not that there's no little weird like nods to Die Hard in this, because there's a couple, but
yeah,
sequels these days tend to be the overly nostalgic, too much reverence for the original. It's all about just worshipping what came before, and it suffers as a movie as a result. This is more like the old school bad sequel, where franchises like with each sequel would like drift away from what the franchise is supposed to be. It would just feel like you're making it like and this happened to a lot of franchises where once you get 4 or 5 entries in, it's like somehow you've just drifted into generic action movie or generic horror movie as opposed to actually being what the movie franchise was supposed to be. And that's what this is like one of the worst examples of that, where you've just drifted into generic action movie of the time, and the color palette and the type of political stuff in this is definitely an of the time thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know the political setting of the original Die Hards. Maybe there was a thing going on with the Germans around that time, but I doubt it. I don't think
Germans specifically. I don't think so, but
yeah, like East Germany, that was the thing with the Berlin Wall or whatever. But still, I don't know. Maybe it's just because it is this thing where it is just the Russians is such a bland choice at the same time. Like, it's like, of course it had to be the Russians, but there's nothing in this that felt creatively sparked. It felt like, oh yeah, we have we have the rights to make another Die Hard. Let's make another Die Hard. And like, honestly, the fact that other things became Die Hards is almost a good thing, because when you think about it, that means that on its own merit, the story wanted to be produced. They wanted to do something with this story, but then they turned it into a Die Hard afterwards for the sake of, well, let's just make that a bit more marketable. This is something where we have the IP, and whether we have a story or not, we're just going to do it.
Yeah. It feels like you could churn out a relatively soulless and not good movie that at least you can see is trying to be Die Hard, and then there's this. There's just no words for how disconnected this is and what the intentions were behind it. So it feels like a complete empty void where there's nothing to praise, there's nothing to enjoy here. It's just a miserable experience, and I really didn't like 4 watching it again, but this is still worse. This is still more bottom of the barrel. And I think my ratings in a second are going to reflect that. But first of all...
Don't do it. Don't make me choose.
Scene of the movie?
I don't know. Man, that's like asking me to pick like, oh, what's your favorite painting from this preschooler's finger painting class? I
can pick something because it's more of an ironic pick. But if anything made me laugh the most, it was probably, the radiation's gone now, we can take off our suits. So I'm going with that purely on it. It made me laugh just because of how stupid it was.
Oh yeah, no, if we're going by stupidity, I have plenty of picks. I could easily pick an entire movie out of this. Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be related to the Chernobyl stuff. I think that it's probably going to be pretty much that same moment, but more so I want to focus on the voiceover of no character on screen is saying this, which makes me think it's added in post. I have nothing to back that up, but it's the combo of, yes, compound 27.4 reduces radiation, followed by them looking at that weird iPad that just shows radiation going from like 60% down to 9, like instantly. And it's like, okay, it's good now. Like that whole sequence there, I was like, oh, okay, so radiation means nothing. Why did we have this at Chernobyl?
MVP of the movie.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Lucy McClane. She came in, she got her paycheck, she got out. I cannot blame her.
And then they decide to respond by removing the only non-evil female character from the movie for the extended cut, which is baffling to me. But
the audiences were tested. The director came in and said, "There's a bit too much estrogen around here for my liking. Let's pump up the testosterone a bit."
Yeah, I think I did this once before, but I'm going to do it again here. I'm picking Jai Courtney, but in the context of, like, you know how like Times Person of the Year isn't necessarily a positive thing.
Oh, okay.
Right? He is the most important person in this movie because his face and how bad he is in this movie is the personification of what this movie is. He is the signpost for the shit turd that is A Good Day to Die Hard. So he is getting MVP in that context. Not because he's good, but because he personifies how shit this is.
I was honestly confused by what you were saying there for a second, because you said, I think I've done this once before, we're going to do it again, Jai Courtney. And I'm like, I don't think anyone's ever given Jai Courtney
No, I think
MVP.
I've done the inverse MVP before.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. I'm going to stand by that for whatever reason that I just gave. All right, so what are you rating Die Hard 5? I know what I'm rating. I'm locked in.
I'm looking at the 3.5 that we gave the last movie, and I'm just thinking, how many points less is it? Like, how far down does it actually go? I honestly think, well, no, there were a few back in Home Alone season that got down pretty low. I was going to say, I think this might set a record for lowest score, but do I think it's worse than those Home Alone movies, I guess is the question.
What did Expendables 4 get?
Expendables 4, that was a 3.5. That matched.
Okay, so that was the Die Hard 4. That was okay.
And that was where I was feeling it. That was I thought I was thinking the same sort of level there.
Hey,
Die Hard.
Hey, I'll say it. Die Hard, Expendables 4 is better than Die Hard 5. I'll go on record.
Yeah, I'd say that. I'd say that in certain aspects. I think the CGI on Expendables 4 was oof.
We're not talking about specifics. We're talking about overall, and
yeah, in general.
I stand by it.
All right, I'm gonna give this one a 1.5. I cannot see any fans of the series liking this. I can't see any casual viewers liking this, and I can't see anybody who's even like never heard of Die Hard coming into this and liking it. I don't think there is a single. I think that this was screened for the studio execs, and they said, "All right, well, put it out on Valentine's Day. We'll hopefully get some lonely suckers up in that theater."
It wasn't until Warner Brothers just canned Batgirl after making it that studios went, we can do that? We can just say no?
Whoa. What do you mean tax breaks? let me really understand that.
Oh, dear. That said, though, if they've like promised Bruce Willis like a cut of the profits, I don't know how that works. Like, they legally obligate you to make profits then. If profits will exist, because obviously if it goes out in bombs, then that's different. But
well, I remember that was a suit behind, I think it was Forrest Gump, where the writer sold the rights to it based off of profits from the movie, but then because of their creative Hollywood accounting, Forrest Gump technically didn't make any money.
Oh yeah, I mean that's different though, because that's like something that's happened a bunch of times as the creative accounting. But I mean specifically in the case of like, if a studio decides to not release a movie when a star was promised like a percentage of the back end, is that breaching is that like, no, you have to release it because you made that promise?
I'm sure it's in the contract where they'd be like, if we don't release it, you get X amount of dollars just as a blanket.
I mean, now after the Batgirl shenanigans, probably is written into the contract, but yeah, because that was the whole thing. I'd say a more comparable thing was Scarlett Johansson for Black Widow, where because they chose to release it on streaming day one, all of a sudden cut into like what she was going to earn from back end. So she was like, "Hey, you screwed me out of money here. Pay me more."
I mean, if you view it from just a basic labor perspective, if somebody does work, they are entitled to be paid for it, regardless of any like contracts or anything like that. Like you work, you get paid. That is the thing. So they have to make some amount of money from showing up and acting every day. Whether or not it's bucket loads, it's got to be something.
Yeah, but we're not arguing that. Obviously, there's like a flat fee they're getting as well. But if the part of the deal that an actor's agreed to be in a movie for is a percentage of the back end, that is made with the expectation of it making something, right?
Right.
So if a movie that was going to be released in theaters and potentially make hundreds of millions of dollars, but get released straight to streaming instead for free, like that is immediately saying, hey, you might have made like 40 extra million from the back end, but now you're going to make barely nothing in the back end. Like, you can understand why an actress like Scarlett Johansson would say, hey, wait a minute, you've basically just screwed out of like what was probably going to be more than half of what I was expecting to get paid. So, there's a reason why they have to deal with these things and whatnot.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm sure it's somewhere in the contract.
So, you give it a 1.5. That's what we're doing.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm debating some around there. Part of me wants to go... Part of me could see the argument for a 2. But just in the sense that, well... because part of me also wants to go with a 1. And I think a 1 out of 10 emotionally feels right to me. Even though I think there's an argument to say, no, but a 1 out of 10, like, does it have too much production value? Does it have this? Does it have that?
Just to be clear, you have given Neil Breen movies a 1 out of 10.
Yes.
Collectively. Like, every time he shows up on Extra Reels over on Patreon, wink, he has gotten a 1 out of 10.
Yes. And I think those are, like, almost indisputable that they are 1 out of 10s. I think from an emotional level, though, I think this is a 1 out of 10. Like, in terms of how pissed off it makes me, in terms of what it does to this franchise, of how unpleasant it is to watch and how it appeals to absolutely no one. Yeah, I think I'm going with the 1. I think I'm saying it's a 1 out of 10. It is that shit.
Fair enough.
It's a special type of big, mainstream, big budget movie to get this level of a score, but
yeah. Now we have to, like, is this going to be it, Pete? Is this the one? Because we have to determine where it falls in the does it make the cut scale. And up until now, every movie we've had on the main show, the lowest we've gone is Cut Your Losses, which is damn low. But there is one lesser than that, which is It Cuts Deep.
It cuts deep. There's no question in my mind. This is the bottom tier.
Oh my. I mean, here's my problem with it. This is the first action movie that we've done for this show where I was actually more bored with the action than the talking scenes. And I was already bored by the talking scenes. Like, I agree with you. I think that this is something where even on a fundamental level, it failed to entertain, and it also is just horrible for the franchise as a whole. So, yeah, Good Day to Die Hard is the first It Cuts Deep on the main show.
Yep. There it is. It's a special place in history. What a turd. So, with that said, I will tell you about Patreon and also what's coming next time. Yes. Obviously, there will be a week off. This is probably also a good time to explain that the schedule will change a little bit for 2025. You don't have to think about it too much. There'll be a week off, and then we're starting Airport season, which is the Airport franchise from the 70s, which is all actiony thrillers about incidents on planes. It's actually what inspired Airplane, the spoof, funnily enough, the first one. But we're doing that. It's basically 70s disaster movie season 3, but we've done most of them now. This was like the one franchise that we'd saved to sort of do its own little season. So that's what we're doing. So that'll be out every Saturday after a week off, as per usual. After that, things are going to change a little bit, though, where instead of Collector's Cut always been on a Saturday, there'll be more gaps on a Saturday, but sometimes there'll be an extra collector's cut on a Tuesday.
Yes.
Most often that'll be the new releases, although sometimes we might use this Tuesday to also give like a sort of quick start to a new franchise where you can get 2 episodes in 1 week, or maybe we'll do a big sort of ending to a franchise where you'll get both a Tuesday and a Saturday. But the main reason we're doing this is to have new releases. So when, let's say later in the year when we're doing Mission Impossible and Mission Impossible 8 comes out, we'll be able to do Mission Impossible 7 the weekend the new movie's coming out, and then that Tuesday after you'll get immediately the new one much quicker. And that's the reason why we're shaking things up a little bit. This does mean that there'll be more gaps on Saturdays, and we'll tell you when those are about to happen. But it does also mean that there's going to be weeks scattered throughout the year where you'll get a Tuesday episode as well as a Saturday. So the actual number of episodes for the year is about the same. We're not reducing any number of episodes. It's just about weirder scheduling wise.
So if you're concerned about missing anything and you're on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and smash that bell in order to stay updated.
I mean, that felt disgusting hearing that, but yes, technically that's true.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and obviously if you want to support the show and get bonus stuff, you get bonus monthly shows from us over on Patreon. There's a bunch of bonus stuff over there, but the 2 shows that me and David do monthly on Patreon is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, and Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made. And to be honest, if it wasn't part of a franchise, this movie would have been very valid on that show.
Yeah, I could see it.
To be honest, though, I feel like we have more fun talking about some of those more movies than we did this one.
I was going to say, Extra Reels is not always, but very often reserved for, oh, I could get drunk and laugh at this, rather than I'm so goddamn bored.
So this was a special kind of hell. But so Airport season starts after a week off, so look forward to that. That'll be the first season of 2025. That's a 4-movie franchise, so not a super long one. And then we've got more stuff planned throughout the year. So yeah, look forward to that. So, and if you also enjoyed the other podcast that we do, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is our sci-fi movie podcast, that's normally on Tuesdays, and that'll occasionally, instead of having gaps every like consistent number of weeks, that's just going to have a gap when there's a collector's cut taking that slot instead. But there'll always be something on a Tuesday on the YouTube. If you're on the audio feed, of course, that doesn't really mean much, but if you listen to both shows, it'll be pretty obvious when those things are happening.
Yep.
So there you go. That's that. That's Die Hard 5. So that Die Hard ends in such a whimper.
I was going to say, that's part of the bad part of this show is anytime we do a franchise that doesn't like end on its own terms, it's just kind of drug out. We always end the season of, well, that sucked.
Yeah, honestly, I recommend the Die Hard trilogy.
I could say that. For someone who is not into Die Hard, for someone who didn't really watch any of them through, going through this season, I can absolutely see the appeal of the first 3, and I can absolutely see the money-grubbing whores behind the scenes that made the second part of that, the last 2 there. Yeah,
it's a shame. But hey, Die Hard 1 is truly special. 2 and 3 are fun sequels to varying degrees. And then leave it at that. Unless you're just morbidly curious, in which case, good luck! So that has been the show. That's been the Collector's Cut. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies. And of course, if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity, which John McClane apparently had.